Good morning, everyone. If you need a Bible, please raise your hand, and we've got some that we've got one that you can borrow. We will be in Exodus 17 this morning, Exodus 17, and we will look at a passage that will teach us how to deal with our enemies. Okay, how to deal with our enemies. So some valuable, very practical info this morning. Exodus chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17. Next Sunday night is the movie night in the sanctuary. And that's for the entire church, but we will have a section for Fusion students, both high school and junior high. We will be watching a movie on the book of Genesis, and whether it is history or not. Is it historical? Is it fact? Is it fiction? And so some great video, and that'll be next Sunday night, 5:30. I'll remind you again at the end. Exodus chapter 17 is all about contention. If you are one of those old school people that still watches boxing, okay, you will have heard the word contender. You have these two contenders that jump in the ring and they fight with one another. Today's study is all about that. It's about contention and tension between people, but problems between people. And we find out how Moses handles it. And in that, you and I gain valuable info on how we too can handle enemies. Two main divisions in chapter 17. The first is the enemy within, who we will see in just a moment. And then the second section is the enemy without, or the enemy outside of their camp. Let's look at, beginning in verse 1, our first section, which is the enemy within, which we find out is Israel itself, fighting with themselves. Verse 1, then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, or Zin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people contended with Moses. Keeping in mind that picture of two boxers jumping into the ring, ready to beat each other's brains out. Therefore the people contended with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." So Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord?" There is this contention there between the children of Israel and Moses, their leader. Now, in the event that you're not sure what is really going on here, let me just bring you up to speed real quickly. God was using Moses. He had used Moses already to lead the people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. They were slaves there. And as they've started their journey toward a promised land, God promised them a land, the land of Canaan. As they are on their way there, they are encountering problems, both from outside of their group and, as we can see, from inside of their group. And along the way, as they deal with these problems, God deals with them, also addresses these things. They're learning things along the way. You may remember we recently read about the children of Israel wanting to be hungry, or not wanting to be hungry, they wanted food. There was a shortage. And they actually said to Moses, "Why didn't you just leave us in Egypt to die sitting next to pots of meat?" So they, in their minds, they thought, hey, it would have been better to just stay in Egypt as slaves and die with a full tummy, is what they were saying. And God, in that instance, provided for them in a miraculous way. He sent birds for them to eat, and then sent manna in the mornings. You remember, miraculously sprinkling manna over them. And so they learned through that event that God could provide, that He could and would provide for their needs. Well, here is a little bit further into their journey, and they come to this place called Rephidim, and what they find when they get there is that there was no water for the people to drink. So what do? Well, they do what any sane individual, any follower of God would do. They turn toward the leader and they want to kill him, because that's what we do. Oftentimes when you and I find ourselves scared over something, worried about something, that can translate into anger on our behalf toward somebody. And most often it is toward a leader. When we go to Target and we're looking around and we find that there is no toilet paper in this whole place. Some may be led to say, man, I just hate Trump. I can't believe that he got rid of all the toilet paper. When we go to our favorite restaurant, and what, the restaurant's closed indefinitely. Just heard about one of our favorite fast food restaurants there in beautiful San Bernardino. It's called Cuca's. It's got Mexican food, and you can go there and get a daily special, and you get 2 bean and cheese burritos. How many of you like bean and cheese burritos? Right? From God, right? Yes. Bean and cheese burritos. And my son came back, he went to pick something up, and he's like, hey, dude, it's closed. And he had to go to a different location, but it's closed. And we could see that and say, oh, I can't believe it's closed. I hate Governor Newsom. Hate that guy. We can oftentimes when we're nervous or worried about something that we don't like, we turn that attention negatively toward the leader, whoever's in charge. Well, he's in charge, it must be his fault. But I want you to take note in verse 1 when it says that they were traveling from their journey from the wilderness of sin. Help me out in verse 1. According to the commandment of the Lord. Yes. So God is directing them. So that means that God directs them to Rephidim, where there is no water. Now, does anybody have a clue, a guess, a wild guess, you just want to throw it out there? Why in the world would God, if he's leading this motley crew, why would he lead them to a place where there is no water? Anybody want to guess? What do you think?
To show them his power?
To show them his power. Is that what you were going to say?
I was going to say give them water out of thin air.
Oh, man. Which he is going to do. Out of a thin rock. I don't know if it's thin rock, but it was, yeah, it's like air. Yeah. And yeah, both the answers are one and the same. Yes, it is because God evidently wants to show them something. It's not like God got them to Rephidim and then, oh, there's no water here. And God, oh, I had no idea. Last time I came through, there was a river. He didn't do that. He was not surprised. He knew exactly what he was doing. He gets them there and says there was no water for the people to drink. And so what did the people do in verse 2? Therefore the people contended with Moses. Contended. Okay? Ready to fight. And they said, give us water that we may drink. And I imagine Moses, he would have done what he's probably, or at least I imagine myself in his spot. Everybody comes, Pastor Chris, give us water. Oh, okay, hold on. Here, let's see. Let me just get you some water real quick. What do you want me to pull out of my pocket, out of my shoe? In his case, out of his sandal. Where do you want me to get water from? Like he's just going to all of a sudden just pull some water out of his hat? That's not going to happen. So they come to him, give us water that we may drink. So Moses said to them, I love this in verse 2, why do you contend with me? Why are you trying to jump in the ring with me? And then he says in verse 2, ask them a second question, why do you tempt the Lord? Now I like this. I'll mention this real quickly because I've mentioned it in the past few weeks. I'll mention it again real quickly and then we'll move on. He does not take this personally. He knows that their worry and their anger, though it's directed at him in the moment, he knows, look, this is none of my doing. God brought us here. God knows what you need. And so he says, why are you tempting the Lord? He immediately takes what is thrown at him and he gives that to God. I like that. That we'll come back. We'll take note of that and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained about Moses. Number one, the enemy, they're motivated by their worries about water. So because they did not have water, they freak out on Moses. I mean, it sounds so simple when you say it like that. Like, really? That's what caused you to want to fight with Moses and doubt God? Seriously? Because you went to the store and couldn't find toilet paper? I'm sorry, because you couldn't find water? Really? So you doubted God because of that? They doubted God because of that. Because of their worry, it turns into anger toward Moses. And in verse 3, the people thirsted for water. The people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it you have brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" You just brought us out here to kill us. You went through all of that madness, all of that mess, just to kill us. It's funny that how unreasonable they are. Really? That's what you're thinking? That Moses has gone through all of this drama just to bring you to Rephidim, just to kill you by you dying from thirst? Seriously? That's what you think? But again, oftentimes in our worry, we become irrational. And we think all kinds of crazy things and blame things on people that just is not absolutely not true. So in verse 4, we see this about Moses. Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." We see the people worried about water. Moses, in turn, is worried about what to do. And he says to God, "What shall I do with this people?" And he gives us some insight into that. Remember that word contenders? They contended with Moses. Look what he says in verse 4. They are almost ready to stone me. Now, that does not mean like, some of you when you were younger, perhaps you had dirt clod wars. You and your cousins get together, hanging out, family party, whatever's going on. Parents are inside, they're having a great time. You're outside throwing dirt clods at your cousin, or they're throwing it back at you. And it's all fun and games until your cousin gets hit in the side of the head, starts crying, goes inside, you get busted, get sent upstairs to the room or whatever. You can't play anymore, we're never having people over or whatever. We're not talking about dirt clods being thrown back and forth at one another. When he says they are almost ready to stone me, what he's saying is these people are about ready to kill me. That's how serious this was. Seriously. Now, I can somewhat understand these people. For a dad, with a family, a wife and kids, he would be concerned not only about his own well-being, but about the well-being of his wife and his kids. And maybe he's got livestock, he's got animals, whatever he's got. So his livelihood, everything that he is really living for, is being threatened by this shortage of water. So I can understand that. What troubles me is that they've been through this type of thing before, when they didn't have food. And they saw God provide. But that worry can cause us to block out all that God has done in the past. We forget all about it, right? I don't know about you, but I do that at times. How many times have I seen God provide for years and years and years and years and years and years and years? And yet I can still come to those places where I doubt because of some circumstances. I can in a moment doubt God and forget about his faithfulness. And then I can begin to fight with other people in my family. Causes tension between us. We begin to contend with one another. So I understand somewhat where they're at. The problem that I have is that they've just recently seen God provide. Well, not just recently. They've been watching God provide miraculously for at least a couple of months now. So Moses is worried about what to do, and what he does is he cries out to the Lord. Well, take note of that also. Moses, when he was worried, took that to God. That's a good thing. I need to remember that. And then he says, they are almost ready to stone me. Now, beginning at verse 5, what do we see? Well, God now is in the mix, so water is provided. But I asked you a question. Why is God now in the mix? I mean, he brought them to Rephidim. He knew there was no water there. And he only now gets involved. Why is that? It is because Moses invites him in. When Moses says, look, there's no water. What am I going to do with these people? They're ready to kill me. What he does in doing so, in taking his worry to God, he invites God to come in and work. And now that God has been invited, let into work, God is able to freely work. This is a lesson that you and I want to learn as soon as possible. The earlier we get it, the better off we'll be. That when I have a worry, a concern, that the sooner I take that to God, the sooner he can begin to work. And Moses gave him that freedom. He opened the door and said, hey, God, I've got this problem. Come on in. And he invites God in. And what does God do? God does what God always does. Verse 5, and the Lord said to Moses, go on before the people. Okay? What he does is, God begins to direct Moses. And he's directing him toward an answer and away from his worry. But it is because Moses has given him the freedom to do so. And he begins to give them instructions here to Moses. And the first thing he says is, go on before the people. So lead the people. You see, you can't lead from behind. Go on before the people. He tells them, secondly, take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take some of the leaders, take some of the elders with you. We need some witnesses for what's about to happen. Also, he says in verse 5, here's the third thing, take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river, and go. So, go before the people, take some witnesses, and then take that stick. This is the same stick that Moses walked into Egypt with. He was a shepherd. And he comes before the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, looking like a shepherd, into the royal court with all of its, with all of the pomp and circumstance of Pharaoh and his royal court. In comes this shepherd, and the shepherd comes in with a stick, smelling like goat still, fresh off the range. And he comes with this stick, and God says, okay, bring that same stick. Okay, I want you to bring that with you. And he says in verse 6, behold, God says, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb. It is clear in verse 6 that God has no intention of sending Moses to Horeb. In fact, God does not send his people anywhere. We've seen this before in the life of Moses early on. We also saw it in the life of Abram. If you were here for Genesis chapter 12, it seems like it was years and years and years ago. But if you were there for those events, as we went through them, you realize something about God. That God does not send Abram. He does not send Moses. He does not send anyone. He invites. It is always an invitation. So God says to Moses here, I want you to go to Horeb. Sounds like he's sending him. I want you to go to Horeb, and I want you to take some people with you, and I want you to take the stick. But then he reveals in verse 6, behold, I will stand before you on the rock in Horeb. In other words, God says, let's go to Horeb together. Now, I like that. It is always, or I should say most of the time, depending on the circumstances, it is always fun and good and encouraging to have somebody along with you. Some of us are introverts. Any introverts in here? You're like, yeah, I'm so introverted, I don't want to raise my hand. I don't want anybody to look at me. Some of us are introverts. And we're okay going places by ourselves. Not a big deal. Go to the mall, go to the store, go to church, go to wherever, by myself, not a big deal. I can listen to whatever kind of music I want to listen to. Right? I can get up and go do whatever I want. I don't have to, check with anybody, okay, or you want to. I don't have to do any of that. Just go by myself. And then some of us like to have companions everywhere we go. Some of the ladies, right? You can't go to the bathroom unless there's 6 of you. A lot of us are like that. Even some of the guys like to have somebody with us all the time. To the thought of walking into a room by yourself. It's terrifying. So you want to get somebody to come with you. Come with me so they can stare at both of us. Then you get there and you realize they're not even looking at us. They don't even know we're here. Moses here learns in verse 6 that God has no intention of sending Moses on his own on some mission, but inviting him on the mission that God is already on. God is in the process of providing water for his people, and he's just revealed to Moses, look, I've got a plan already, just come with me. I want you to note this, that if Moses had said, listen, God is busy, he is trying to keep the world spinning and keep the universe intact, and I don't want to bug him. I'm going to try and handle this by myself, handle this problem, and I'm going to go look for water. I'm going to take some of those divining rods, and just walk around until I find water or something, and then we're going to dig it. If Moses had decided not to include God, if he had decided not to include God, he never would have had the opportunity to experience God in such a way. But because he invites God immediately, I'm worried. What do I do about these people? There's no water. They're going to kill me. God then has the freedom to say, hey, Moses, look, I've already got a plan in process. And you and I will find the same thing, that when that worry begins to set in and I take it to God, that God immediately begins to work, to handle and to deal with and to answer the problem that is facing us. God says in verse 6, behold, I will stand before you on the rock in Horeb. And check this out. This is nothing. This is incredible. But by now, we're 17 chapters into this book. We've seen God do so many things. It's like, God could do this any day. Verse 6, he says, and you shall strike the rock, Moses, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. I can remember being on one of the beaches there in the Philippines. I was on vacation, mission trip. Although there was a little bit of downtime, we were at the Bible college, which is a very small college, right on the shores there on the beach. It's hot, it's humid all the time. And I went down walking toward the water. We were kind of in between painting. And so go down to go get in the water and just kind of cool off. The idea in the Philippines is, at least this is what I found to be helpful, it's hot oftentimes. So as often as you can get in the water and get out, and get back in and get out, is a good thing. You would think that the water's not like our water here on the coast, west coast. The water there is very warm. So you get in for a little while and it feels refreshing, feels good. But then after a little while you realize this water does not feel so cool anymore. Because it's warm water. You get out and you kind of cool off a little bit because you're wet. And then after you start to warm up again, you go back in, you kind of do that kind of thing. So I was going down to the beach or to the water there to try and cool off for a little bit. I was by myself, introvert, and as I'm walking down there, I go, it's sandy, of course, and then there are some rocks out there. And as I'm walking out, I stepped into this pool of water that was there. And it was cold. And I mean cold, like way colder than the ocean. And I'm thinking, that is really weird because the ocean's just right there and this water is super cold. Like, what is the deal? Well, what I found after looking around for a moment was that it was actually fresh water that was coming from some underground source. Not like a busted pipe or something like that, but it's like, what's that floating in there? But it was fresh water coming from underground, coming from some other source, and so it was very, very cold. So I proceeded to lay myself down in that pool. It's like, forget the ocean. I'm laying down right here in this little sandy pool, and I'm just hanging out in there for a little while. This was not just some natural formation that was there. This is a rock that is dry and sandy and dusty. There is no water. Not until Moses, by faith, strikes the rock. But he must, by faith. Imagine, you and I'm still planning a trip for the guys to go to Joshua Tree National Park, go climb on boulders and roll in the dirt and whatever else you guys like to do. Okay, right? Now that we're men, right? But imagine being in Joshua Tree National Park. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you go there, you will find that it's dusty. It sounds gross, but it's incredible. Okay? And you will very rarely find any water there. It normally is caught in little pools, maybe in the rocks, where there's an indentation and there might be water there. There might be. Okay? But it's just dusty. And none of us would ever imagine, and rightly so, that, hey, let me just go hit this rock and water will come out. That doesn't happen. So this is a miraculous event, obviously, a miracle performed by God. But he goes to this rock and hits it, but he's got to do so by faith. If we're at Joshua Tree National Park and I say to Jordan, we're out of water, would you go over to that rock and go hit it with your stick and get us some water? That would be ridiculous, right? He would go over to that rock and he would pull out his phone and call the police on me. Like, this man got us out in the middle of the desert and there's no water and he wants me to hit rocks, We're not doing that. So Moses, by faith, now listen. Does anybody remember who is with Moses? There's God is there and Moses is there. Is there anyone else there that's with them?
The elders.
The elders. Now, imagine the elders are watching their leader. And the leader says, hey, stand there, watch this. And he goes over to a rock with his stick and hits the rock. What are they thinking? They're thinking, I need to pull my cell phone out and call the police on this guy because he's lost his mind. He's lost his marbles. So he has to, in front of those elders, those leaders, go over and hit a rock, something that seems completely ridiculous. If you're looking for water, you're not going to find it there. Yet, that is exactly where he finds the water. Not because the water was in there. It wasn't like a gender reveal. Pop the balloon, boom, there's the water. Oh, so exciting. There was no rock in the water. It was provided by God through this act of faith on behalf of Moses. But he had to obey what God was telling him to do. And so there are things that seem crazy to us and to other people. Like somebody is bullying you or has treated you wrong, done something to violate you. And the Bible says, love your enemies. And so you must, by faith, in obedience to God's word, love your enemies. That does not mean that you have to allow yourself to be violated or attacked. That's not what I'm saying. But we are responsible for loving our enemies. And people will look at us and go, you're crazy. Why would you love that person that did such and such to you? By faith. I'm doing what God has told me to do, instructed me to do. So Moses had to do the same. And so in verse 6, God says, listen, I'll be standing there on the rock before you. I'll be with you. I'm leading you there. Strike the rock. Water will come out of it that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Imagine those leaders. No, seriously, he hit the rock with a stick and water came out. Everybody shows up. Oh, water. They're filling their jugs. Man, how did you find this place? Imagine. Your dad's like, with Moses and he hit I don't know what he was doing. He was hitting a rock with a stick and water came out of it. Now he's got testimony. Now he's got witnesses. So Moses did so at the end of verse 6 in the sight of all the elders of Israel. So Moses called the name of the place Massah, which means tempted, and Meribah, contention, because of the contention of the children of Israel. And because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So evidently at some point, they were questioning God. Look, is God here or is he not here? Now we've seen the enemy within. They were worried about water. Moses worried about what to do, and yet God provides that water. Let's look at what's going on with the enemy without. We saw the first that the enemy within was Israel. Now we see that it is the enemy outside of the Israelites named Amalek. Verse 8. In verses 8 and 9, we are going to see the plan. Now, Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Now, what a terrifying thing that must have been. It's one thing to be at your home and somebody attacks you which is not a good thing, or it would be a scary thing. But at least you've got your home. You're in a familiar place. You know where the safe places are. But imagine you're out in the open and traveling, and you're attacked that way. It is important for you and I to understand that the fact that you and I, number one, are on our way somewhere. This world, I've told you this many times before, this world is not our final destination. It is not our home. Regardless of how many years you spend here, this is not your final resting place. Now that is wonderful news, because this world is so topsy-turvy. But good news. The worst that this world can be is as bad as it will ever get for you and I, because we are headed for something far greater than this. There are many people for whom this world is the best that they will ever experience, because they will continue to reject God and his means of salvation, Jesus, and they will find themselves in eternity in hell. And this will have been the best that they ever experienced. How sad is that? These people are on a journey. So you and I are on a journey. We're going home. You must understand that because we belong to God, and because God is leading us and protecting us and providing all of those things, which he is, but that does not dismiss us from experiencing attack. We all know this. This makes sense to us. But sometimes we experience hardships or difficulties or attacks from people, and we think, oh, how could this possibly be? I thought God was on my side, and why would God allow this? God must not really be there, or this wouldn't have happened. No. That is going to happen. The enemy is going to attack. So they are susceptible to attack. Amalek came out and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Now, number one, who is Amalek? Does anybody have a clue as to who Amalek is? If you were here for our study through Genesis, you have heard the name Amalek before. There were, back in Genesis, two brothers. One was named Jacob, the other Esau. Okay? Jacob ends up becoming who? Does anybody remember who Jacob ends up becoming? Israel. He gets his name changed to Israel, but then he eventually, his family, as it grows into the children of Israel. That's who ended up in Egypt. Those were God's people. Esau, on the other hand, there was definitely a difference between him and Jacob. Esau at one point wanted to kill Jacob. So there was contention between the two. There was a difference between the two. Well, when you go back and you read to find out who Amalek is, you find out that Amalek is one of the descendants of Esau. And now we see these descendants attacking the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites. So that contention is still there. So in verse 9, Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Now, there are tests of faith all over the place. Note what Moses says to Joshua. Listen, gather up some soldiers, and I want you to go out tomorrow, and I want you to war with Amalek. But don't worry, I'll be up on the hill. Does that sound right? Like, listen, I really want you to just risk your life, put your life on the line and the life of all those soldiers. Go down there and fight. I'll be up on the hill watching. It sounds like, wait a minute, I don't think this doesn't sound, why aren't you coming with us? But it is a test of faith once again. So the plan is laid out. We will go down and meet, and I'll be up on the hill with God, the stick of God in my hand. Beginning at verse 10, we see positioning. So Joshua did as Moses said to him, obedience by faith, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand. So we have Joshua and the soldiers down fighting with the Amalekites. And we have Moses, Aaron, and Hur up on top of the hill. And look what they discovered in verse 11. And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, probably with the rod in his hand, that Israel prevailed. That is, they prevailed in the battle that was going on down below. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. Now, again, Moses, by faith, realizes that when I keep my hand up, we win. I assume, it does not say here, I believe that it's safe to assume that God was directing Moses in all of this. Now, we're not told that expressly, but he must have been. I don't think that Moses just dreamed this up. I don't think this would have been the type of thing that Moses would have dreamed up on his own. This sounds like a plan from God, something only God could do. Like, just go up on that hill, lift your hand up, and you'll win the battle. All right, makes sense, right? No, but that's God working. And so it was. Okay, verse 12. But Moses' hands became heavy. Anybody in here ever done that challenge where you just stand and hold your hand out and see how long you can keep it up? And it's like, I could be here for hours. And after like 45 seconds, oh my gosh, my arm's going to fall off. And then add something to it. Like, you just put something in your hand and hold on to it. Let's see who can, keep it out the longest. It's like, not a big deal, it's not, I just got my phone in my hand, whatever. And after 30 seconds, it's like, oh, my arm's going to fall off. Moses is standing there with his arm up, and as long as he does that, the children of Israel are winning. However, as he begins to drop his arm, verse 11, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became so heavy, they became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him. Who put a stone under Moses? Who was there?
Aaron.
Aaron and Hur. Yes, Aaron and Hur. They put a stone under Moses, and it says in verse 12, and he sat on it. It's a good start. Okay, old man, get him something to sit on. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Now this is a little bit funny for me, because I'm thinking Aaron ran and said, sit him down. So he sits down. Okay, I'll hold this arm up, and Hur, you hold the other one up. And I think, well, that was very, very nice. But me and my practical, puny little brain, I'm thinking, if I'm Moses, even with my hands up, it's like, isn't all the blood gonna stop circulating and kind of rush down, and my arms gonna fall asleep? You get that tingling sensation in your arms. It seems like at the end of it, when they're won the battle, I imagine Aaron and Hur just dropping his arms because they're excited, and it's like whoop, he just dies. He's trying to celebrate. Sometimes when your foot falls asleep and you're trying to get out of bed, and it's like I can't feel anything. Right? Can you imagine Aaron? Moses is like, yeah, he's all excited. At the end of it, it's like, whoop. And they're like, Moses, why aren't you celebrating? I am. My whole body's asleep. Aaron and Hur, again, we see it over and over and over again. For some reason, they have it is in their mind that as long as the hands of Moses are up, they're winning the battle. Whether it was God that told them that, whether it was Moses that told them that, or whether they realized, however they found out or came to realize, they, by faith, had to act on it. If you believe that victory is ours as long as his hands are up and his hands are dropping, then by faith you must lift his hands up. And so they did. The story of the Exodus is so much more than just getting them out of Egypt. It is the story, the picture of a dad, a father, a good father, training his children for something greater. In order for the children of Israel to fully experience and appreciate all that God had planned for them in the land of Canaan, the promised land, a land flowing with, yes. In order for them to fully appreciate what God had there, they had to learn about God's provisions along the journey so that when they got there, they would realize this is from God. And so that is what a good dad does. Some of us have had good dads. I had a good dad. I've not talked to him in many, many years now, but growing up, he was a great dad. Taught me how to hit a baseball. We would go outside for hours in the driveway, and he would pitch pinto beans at me in order that I might train my eye to see that tiny little pinto bean. And if I could hit that pinto bean, then certainly I could hit a baseball. Hours and hours. We had so many bean plants growing outside. It's like, crack. Oh, there's another one. A few months later, there's a bean plant growing, We're Hispanic. We eat beans, huh? Right? So, but he for many hours. And there were many other things that he taught me to do. I was blessed in that way. Now, he was not a Christian for many of those years, so I did not really learn about the Lord. I learned lots of other valuable info, but not really about the Lord, not till much later. But these are the things that a good dad does. Some of us have not been blessed with that. I am, from the bottom of my heart, I am very sorry. No joking, all kidding aside, I am very sorry. But good news, God says that he is the father to the fatherless. If you find yourself saying, you know what, I didn't have a dad to show me, allow God to teach you those lessons. He can do that. How many of you know Chris Plaza? Everybody in the world knows Chris Plaza, right? He could run for president, right? We all know Chris, and we love Chris. Now, Chris has a dad that has been a blessing to him all of his life, okay? But all of us know, we know lots of things about Chris. He's got a shiny head, right? That's one thing that we know. We know lots of things about him, right? He loves the Yankees. We know that. But what we also know about him and what we admire about him is that he has the heart of a father. Chris has no kids of his own, but many of you have become children to him. He has the heart of a father. Now, he has no kids that he would have learned that from having his own kids. And there's only so much about that you can learn from your parents or grandparents. Where did that heart of a father come from? It came from God putting that in Chris. That is what God can do. If you find yourself without an earthly father to train you, allow God to teach you those lessons. He can do that. But you must make the effort to draw close to him. They are positioning themselves. And each person has a position. Imagine what this place would look like if I came to the front next Sunday morning or this coming Wednesday night and I picked up the guitar, said, okay, let's all stand. I'm going to lead worship. And then, I forgot to turn the mic on. I'll be right back. And I run to the back, push a button, come back. Okay, sorry, let's all stand. Okay. Forgot to put the words up there. I'll be right back. Run to the back, click a button on the computer, come back. Okay, there's the first verse. Okay, let's all get started. And kumbaya, my Lord. Hold on, I'll be right back. Next verse, and I run to the back, click another button. Okay, kumbaya, my Lord. And I come back and I go back and forth and back. I forgot to turn off the lights. Go turn the lights off, come back in the dark, hit a chair trip. Then I get here and realize, stage lights aren't on. I'll be right back. And I run to the back and go turn the stage lights on, come back. You find yourself in need of prayer. I would pray for you, except I need to go turn everything off. Or I need to wipe down all the chairs. Or I need to. The point that I'm making is that we've got Zach and Zach. It's the Zach attack. We've got the Perrys. We've got Hannah. We had Ashley in the back working the computer. We've got people working the sound. We've got other people leading worship. We've got Matt to lead worship, which is a good thing. The point is that I cannot possibly do all of this by myself. I can teach a Bible study. Been a teacher for a long time. I can teach a Bible study. But it would basically be me just standing here, nothing else. Let's just all come in, sit down, and let's just open up our Bibles. But everybody has a position. And those positions are vitally important. The leaders that are in here helping out, assisting, are all volunteer. And they realize something. They realize, like Aaron and Hur realized that old man needed a seat and he needs some help. The leaders in here realize that old man needs some help. And so they have joined together with me to assist me. They realize that God will see victory in the lives of all of you if they come in and assist. So everybody has a position. Extremely important that everybody pick their position. If you were here on Wednesday night, we talked about that. Talked about the importance of being here. Nathan's got something that I don't have. So he doesn't just come here to get, but to give. Jordan's got something that I don't have, and that you don't have, and that Nathan doesn't have. And so he comes here not just to get, but to give, to impart that. Alex has got something that the rest of us don't have, and so she comes here to impart, to give, not just to get. Everybody has a part. It's not just the leadership team, and this certainly is not the Chris Amaro show, because it would have been canceled already. It's not just about me, and it's not just about the leadership team. It's about every single one of us having that mindset that when I go to church, I'm going there to be a blessing to somebody. And maybe it's with an encouraging word, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's pointing them to the Bible, maybe it's grabbing a vacuum and doing something, maybe it's, hey, you need me to switch those lights off, whatever it might be. But each of us has a part to play. We all position ourselves accordingly. So in verse 12, but Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Verses 14, 15, and 16, we see a promise. And if there's a promise being given, it must be God. Then the Lord said to Moses in verse 14, write this for a memorial in the book. So he's keeping record, keeping a book, and recount it in the hearing of Joshua. This is what God says, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. The promise from God that he will wipe out their enemy. He is going to do that. So Moses in verse 15, and Moses built an altar and called its name, the Lord is my banner, Yahweh or Jehovah Nisi. The Lord is my banner. The Lord is the banner over me. He's the, as we're going into war, he's the banner. This is not some earthly man's army. But this is God defending us, watching over us, protecting us. Jehovah Nisi. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. What God promised, he will do. What God promised, he will do. Now, there are three things as we close this down. How to deal with enemies. What have we seen here? Well, back in verse 4, we learned a lesson, and the first lesson is, let God know. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, what shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me. It is so important that you and I learn to take our problems to God, our worries. And we should take our worries to God after we have chewed our nails off and woke up 20 times at night because I can't stop thinking about it. and gotten freaked out over it, gotten angry and argued with my parents. So I should do all of that stuff first and then take it to God, right? Moses immediately takes it to God. So you and I must learn the very first reaction must always be, but what about God? What does God say? God, here, I've got this worry. It's now yours. Go. Let God know. But the second thing that we learn here is to let God lead. We saw that in verse 5. Go on before the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod. He gives them instructions. Let God lead. God was allowed to lead because Moses had immediately invited him in. I'm worried. What should we do? And lastly, we saw that further on down the section in verses, beginning at verse 10, well, beginning at verse 9, actually, with Joshua and Aaron and Hur. Let others help. Let other people get in the mix. And by others, I don't mean all of the people on your softball team. I'm talking about Christians. I'm talking about this family that you have here. Sunday nights, or Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, different events. You come here and you say, hey, I'm freaking out over this thing. And you allow that person to come in and help you, to assist you, to encourage you, to go with you to God, to remind you of those things. Too many of us want to be lone rangers. Just do it all by myself. I don't need anyone. I don't need anybody's help. In fact, I don't even need God. I'll just do it by myself. But we must let God know, let God lead, and let others help. Let others